The NCAA says there are 5 championship contenders in black college football. I agree with those 5, but I have 2 more that I would like to add to the list. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
On, family. Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your numero uno daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. And I appreciate you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day, and choosing me first thing in the morning. Ooh, thank you for that. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusive. Starts with an S, ends with an S, and it's football season, so make sure you're tapping in. I'll say it again, at South Exclusives. Starts with an S, ends with an S. Follow me on Twitter, DM me so we can talk. I don't care what it's about. Let's chop it up. All right. That being said, today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege, and you will get $20 off of your first purchase. We wrap up today's episode discussing Alabama A&M's new pregame show and why all of the HBCUs should be looking at their success to see if they should copy it. Before that, we stick in the state of Alabama because Alabama State, the Hornets, have announced their starting quarterback, and it's still Dee Davis. To some, that might be a surprise. To me, not really. I kind of call it an unsurprising surprise. But before any of that, because we are previewing the season, we have new pregame shows. We have starting quarterbacks retaining their job, but really the announcement is the important part. But before any of it, who are the championship contenders in black college football this year? If you ask Dan Beckton at NCAA.com, he'll tell you that there's 5. If you ask Darian Gray, the Mouth of the South and Locked On HBCU, he'll tell you that there are 7. I agree with all of the 5, but I have 2 more that I would like to add. Now, these tiers, because they are broken into tiers, this was made before week 0. But Jackson State was already a part of the 5. Oops, spilled the beans. But Jackson State is already a part of that 5 in the championship tier. And they won in week 0. So nothing really changes outside of where you might place them within the tier, because they are rankings and tiers at the same time. For example, North Carolina Central is number 1, and they are the only team that is in the top dog tier. They're the defending national champions. They return a lot of people. It makes sense. I do wonder, maybe if Jackson State hadn't lost all of the talent, they were basically returning last year's team, would you have had 2 teams in the top dog? I would have. That would have been a sure thing. I would have said, yeah, Jackson State is a top dog. We got to put them in there as well. Who knows? That's not what happened. That's not what the rankings say. Moving on. After North Carolina Central, you have FAMU, Southern, Howard, and Jackson State. Central is in the top dog tier. Those 4 other teams make up the championship sites tier, which means, not in the literal sense because every team has their eyes on a championship, but to me, that means they are legitimate contenders. And with that, those are the 5 teams that Mr. Beckton and the NCAA says are championship contenders. And I agree with every single one. North Carolina Central returns everybody. FAMU, to me, should still be the favorite in the East coming to the season. We had no idea it was that good. Some people might have. Shout out to you if you knew that, okay? I'm not even going to deny that you knew it. But a lot of us didn't know. So, yeah, FAMU was the favorite coming into the East. Southern, they looked good last year. They were the champions. Howard, they looked good at the end of the year. They were co-champions. Jackson State, there was a lot of promise around the transfer portal. I just needed to see it, but I would understand putting them in the championship tier. I agree with those 5. Now, 6 through 10, once again, I don't really care about the rankings. I don't care about the order. I care about the tiers. For me, rankings are cool, and we'll go over these lists because they'll continue to make them week after week the same way that they did last season, and we will cover it week after week the same way that we did last season. So once the season gets going, then the rankings will be cool because I can watch how they rise and fall. But that being said, I don't care right now 6 through 10 in the order. I care that 6 and 7 are in the bubbling under tier. I care that 8 through 10 are in the sleepers tier. And I would like to take two of those teams and say, I'm fully awake. I'm not sleeping on Texas Southern. I'm not sleeping on Alcorn. So I would like to take those two teams and move them into the championship tier. I already know how this goes. You see the flag behind me. You hear the introduction. You hear that I'm putting Texas Southern into a championship tier, and they haven't been anywhere near that in forever. I get it. Sounds like a homer. Before you call me a homer, and I have no problem with you doing that, this is my definition of a championship contender. If you listen, some people want to jump to conclusions. If you can make the SWAC championship game, I consider you a championship contender. For many people, what a championship contender is different, but for me, if you can make it to the SWAC championship game, or I believe you are a legitimate contender to make it to the SWAC championship game, then I consider you a championship contender. That's how I look at it. And for me, Southern, Alcorn, Texas Southern will be the three teams that are fighting it out to win the SWAC West at the end of the season, which makes them all championship contenders. By my definition, by my framework, and by my criteria, that is the case. Now, if you disagree with me, that's fine. I don't need everybody to agree. But if you do disagree, I would like to know, well, do you feel like Texas Southern, Alcorn, and Southern will be fighting it out for the SWAC West? Or do you not feel like that is an appropriate, or that is an appropriate? I messed that up twice. Do you not feel like that is an appropriate? I was just going to say inappropriate so bad. But do you think that's a befitting criteria to call a championship contender? If you think I'm wrong, it has to be one of those things you disagree with. Either you don't think that TSU, Alcorn, and Southern are going to fight it out, or you're only looking at, well, can you win the Celebration Bowl? And I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if TSU can do that. I don't know if they're ready for that. But I'll say this, if the SWAC West battle goes the way I think it will, in which you don't just luck into a situation, then yeah, I'm going to say that they can win the Celebration Bowl. Like if it ends up being where you have three good competitive teams, because sometimes races are close because, well, all these teams are kind of garbage. Like think about the worst division in football. All right, I'll be honest with you. It was the NFC South last year. I ain't too proud about it. I don't think that Tampa was that great of a team, but they were in a really bad division. I don't think that that's going to be the SWAC West. I think that Southern, Texas Southern, and Alcorn are all going to be really good teams. I think that's what's going to happen. So it's going to be, one has to be the guy, one has to be the team, but they can't all be the guy, but they're going to be all good, right? Why wouldn't I put Alabama State there? Because technically in the rankings, Alabama State is in the bubbling under tier with North Carolina A&T. Yes, the independents are there. I'm not quite sure how you would consider them championship. But to me, this has to do with context when I look at Alabama State versus the two teams I took from the sleeper tier. I don't care if you think Alabama State is a better team than either one of them. Alabama State is in a worse off situation. I don't think that Alabama State, until they get their quarterback situation together and prove that they have it together, is a team that can compete with a FAMU, that can compete with the Jackson State we saw in week 0. I don't believe that. I believe they are a step below, meaning they don't really have a chance to make it to the SWAC championship game. TSU, Alcorn do. Why don't I feel like Alabama State has that? They have a great defense, but I don't believe banking on your defense to never allow more than 17 points is a viable strategy. You have a great defense. You lock people down. But if that's your method of winning, I don't know if that works. I don't know if that works. You know, the thing is, if your offense can't score, you're never really putting a game away. You're not. So that's my real worry when it comes to Alabama State. But then again, if Dee Davis can get it together, then I feel a little bit differently. Let's see if he can, because Alabama State just announced him as their starting quarterback in an unsurprising surprise that we'll dive into as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. And if you're one of the people who suffer from procrastination, I get it. I'm guilty too. But when I do procrastinate, the best place to go to is Gametime. Sometimes you don't want to plan out, get your tickets months in advance. Sometimes you want to wait. And sometimes when you wait, you get a better deal with Gametime. Listen, the Gametime guarantee means you will always get the best price. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. It's a great thing. Listen, got a comedy show? Good for you. Theater play? Good for you. Music concert? Good for you. Football game, NBA, WNBA, MLS, like it's good for everything. They have whatever you need. Go on the Gametime app now, and when you do, create yourself an account. Use the promo code Locked On College, and you will get $20 off your purchase. Terms and conditions do apply. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For my everydayers out there, tomorrow's episode, we will be breaking down North Carolina A&T's new venture into the CAA. Excuse me, almost messed that up. But into the CAA. And the college football season is here. And this season, Locked On is kicking off our coverage with the Locked On College Football Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 to 1 Eastern, so 10 to 12 Central on every single platform. We'll cover the playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, in-depth breakdowns that only Locked On can do. And yes, they are trying to find a way to make sure that the FCS and the HBCU community is represented as well. So I can't wait to tell you how I will be a part of that program. But right now, Dee Davis is the Alabama State starting quarterback, and this is an unsurprising surprise. That statement may feel like a tad bit of a contradiction, but I've said it 2 times, and I'm committed to kind of analyzing this situation that way. Because to me, many people thought this wasn't going to happen. But when you really pay attention to some of the things that Coach Rob said, I always felt like this was going to be the outcome. Whether or not I felt like this should be the outcome or not, I always thought this was going to be the outcome. See, the reason I use this contradiction is because over the last 3 months, I feel like Dee Davis has been completely written off. Completely written off. They have deemed him incapable and not deserving of being the starting quarterback for Alabama State. I feel like that's been the conversation. I don't remember the last time I've seen or heard anything good about Dee Davis in his play. I do not remember that. I was one of the last people who was still on that train. And one thing that I need to separate undeserving and incapable. You get it, he bad last year. You can say he had bad games last year. 100%. I agree with that. After looking at some of the stuff, I agree. But to call him incapable, I don't agree with that. Because incapable means he can't pick it up. Incapable means he can't improve his play. I think that Dee Davis is an extremely talented quarterback. But to say he can't, I don't think he showed last year to full extent. I'm willing to say that he improved this year. And I think that many people aren't willing to say that. That's where I kind of differ. Objectively, he didn't play well in 2022. But this is a guy who had a lot of high hopes. In 2022. I'm not giving up on him in 2023 and saying he can't do it. There's a reason we're in a battle. Yes, he didn't play well. But man, I didn't know he had to be that. That's his first bit of college football ever. Like, he didn't play at Auburn. So that's his first lick of college football for real. And that's what we're critiquing him on. I don't believe that's fair. I think he can improve. Now, the reason that is surprising is because I think everybody counted him out and thought, okay, it wasn't even about wanting Damon Stewart. It was about not wanting Dee Davis. Over everything else, it was about not wanting Dee Davis. So I think that Dee Davis can do it. And the conversation around him needs to change, and the hope needs to be there. I don't know how Alabama State people are feeling. I don't really hear them talk too much about it. I hear other people talk about it. But for me, the reason this lines up is because I think this is the type of offense that Coach Eddie Robinson would like to run. I think Coach Eddie Robinson is looking for an offense that is run heavy, leans on the running backs, And I would have liked to do that with Damon Stewart, right? Because I'm not at practice. I was only able to see a couple of clips from one practice. And in that, I liked Damon Stewart's game more. From the things I heard, I liked the style of offense they ran with Damon Stewart more. It was more spread out. It wasn't as condensed. And I mean, horizontally, not vertically, not talking about all the passing concepts and things of that nature. I mean, just vertically, horizontally, there was wider offenses. You had more receivers spread out. Instead of Dee Davis, you had a more condensed offense. And if you want to go run heavy, you can do it with both, but you might lean towards the run heavy aspect of it. Cool, I get it. That's just not what I would have done. And it looked like Stewart was throwing the ball better. I want the quarterback who I feel like can make more plays with his arm, and that's what I felt like I saw in those couple of clips I saw in practice. Maybe that wasn't consistent. Maybe that's not what it always was. I wasn't there. But if you're asking for my opinion, because I try not to straddle the fence, I try not to tiptoe around things. If I have an opinion on it, I'll give you the opinion on it. I'm not here to just, oh, well, you could do this, you could do that. No. If I was in those shoes and I consistently saw what I saw in that one day of practice, I would have chose Dee Stewart, or excuse me, I would have Dee Stewart. Yeah, I'm combining them. I'm choosing Dee Stewart. Screw Dee Davis, screw Damon Stewart. I'm choosing Dee Stewart. Nah, man. But from those things that I did see, I would have chosen Damon Stewart because he just ran an offense that I gravitated towards a little bit more. So that's what I would have done. But overall, when you talk about leaning on a running back, you don't want your quarterback to make too many plays. It sounds like they're going to use Dee Davis in a role where it's just like, all right, you run the ball more. We put less responsibility on you in the passing game. And that's going to be how we find success within the offense. I'm not surprised. Many people wrote it off, so it's a surprise to some. But if you pay attention to some of the things he said, I think this kind of lines up with what Coach Eddie Robinson wants in his quarterback. So I can't wait until Southern, because they play Southern week 1. It's not a conference game, but it's a conference opponent. So those games still mean a little bit more than a regular non-conference game to me, even though it doesn't. Conference games are the only thing that matter in college, right? Like, let's just get this out the way, because some people might not realize. You might look at overall record. That's fine. But the only thing that actually matters in college is the conference games. This is a non-conference game against a conference opponent, so it doesn't go in that category. It means nothing to the end of the year. Southern beats Alabama State, but then Alabama State wins the rest of their games. They are going to win the SWAC East. It has no impact on that, no bearing on that. Okay, I just want to make that clear. But still, you're playing Southern. You don't want to lose that game. I don't think the leash is going to be long for Dee Davis. I said this when discussing Corey Fields. Whoever won that Alabama State battle was going to be the team that, or was going to be a guy who didn't have a long leash. That's how I feel still to this day. I said it on Monday. I feel this way now here on Wednesday. So, yeah, SWAC East out there for the battle, or out there for the taking. Let's see if Dee Davis can make this a 3-team race and not just a 2-team race, because if he can't, then that game between Florida A&M and Jackson State for the 3rd year in a row will be the game that decides who wins the SWAC East and possibly the SWAC. But moving forward, forget the competition. I think Alabama A&M just did a really cool thing and made their own pregame show. Y'all need to be paying attention and see if y'all can take that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. And as we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Alabama A&M just made their own pregame show. And I think that this is something that more HBCUs need to try to adopt. I once read a book talking about steal like an artist. They need to steal like an artist. Sometimes it's cool to be inspired. Sometimes it's cool to just be inspired. And I think that, I don't care who it is, Grambling, Mississippi Valley State, Tennessee State, like, we're not just talking to SWAC. We're talking about all HBCUs should adopt this plan that Alabama A&M has, because they are debuting a new pregame show for the football games, only the home games. It'll be in Louis Crews Stadium. It'll be actually on site so people can show up. I don't even think you need to have a ticket to the game. I think you can show up. You can be a part of the show. You can get some camera time. Like, it's a great event for those around. The students who show up to the first 100 students, you get a bunch of free stuff, right? Like, I'm not promoting this event, but I do want to articulate just how special I think this is. It's the first partnership that WAFF has had with a collegiate brand of any kind. It's the first HBCU to have a pregame show. Grambling did something similar to this for their spring game in 2022 when they brought the Pivot podcast. I hope that they can do that again at some point because the Pivot is way bigger than it was then. But you brought the Pivot on. You got to interview players. You got to interview the coach. Like, it was an affair. It was a big thing. It was a spectacle, and I like it. You mix the spectacle with substance, and you have something special. Ooh. Hold on now. And I believe that if you want to be a big deal, you have to treat yourself like a big deal, right? And you know, better yet, if you treat yourself like a big deal, you have a better shot of becoming a big deal. That's a better way to put it. It's kind of like clothing, right? And not none of that weirdo stuff of she was dressed like this, so like dead that. But the idea, I'll just use men for the example. The guy in the hoodie and the guy in the suit, when expressing their opinions, most times, if you don't know who they are going to have different levels of reception from the audience. Presentation matters. The weatherman could go in there and dress in shorts just to show you, hey, it's 110 degrees outside. I think that'd be pretty cool. I think that'd be an innovative way to give weather. Hey, the weatherman comes in dressed for the weather every day. But that's not going to work for most people because presentation matters in the way that they look at things. Is you have this suit on, you know what you're talking about. Let me not make it sound like I could be a meteorologist. I can't. But I can go tell you how hot it is. And if they just come out in shorts and they say, hey, it's 97 degrees, it's 102 degrees, the humidity is this, a lot of times they'll just be looked at like me telling you what the weather is. And that's not fair. But they dress in suits because that's the way that it happens. Presentation matters. So when I look at it, that's how I feel about this game. Tell me that it's special. Put a 30-minute pregame show out every single week. Tell me that the Magic City Classic is even more special. So we're going to put up an hour pregame show. Let me know that the fans can come in. Let me know that everybody else who maybe isn't able to make it to the game, even if it is only people who are able to make it to the game, like, show me that you're trying to do something different, trying to do something innovative. Show me that you're trying to attempt to change something. And I think it should change for a lot of people because I look at Alabama A&M's pregame show, 3 segments, you're breaking it down. I would love if you could start getting student media into it. They probably will have their own people at first, but student media, I would love to get in there. I'm a big proponent of using student media because I was a student media person, right? Member, I should say. And I don't feel like I was used in the way that I would like to have been used. So just trying to make good on those things. But overall, more people need to do it. Highlight your games. Highlight your players. How many people are really talking about your players? Let's be real. How many people are talking about your players? I'm talking to you as a fan. How many people are talking about your favorite players on your team? How many times do you feel like you have certain players at positions that don't get enough shine? Well, that can be rectified by your own media. Yes, we want love from national media. All fans do. All fans do. And most of the fans who don't or say that they don't have been jaded by not receiving it and being irritated by not receiving it. But you started off wanting that praise. Like, dang, why national media only talking about these 2 teams? Why they not talking about us? Why they don't acknowledge that we have a star cornerback? Why don't they acknowledge that we have a great linebacker? Why don't they do those things? You wanted that national shine, but it's okay. Get your own local media. Even I can't cover everybody. I'm national media. I might be guilty of that. You might feel like, dang, why ain't the mouth of the South talking about this specific player on my team? Sorry. You're going to miss some people. I got a lot of HBCUs out here. I'm going to miss some players. Well, if you feel like I'm missing somebody from Mississippi Valley State, if you feel like I'm missing somebody from Delaware State, maybe you feel like Hampton isn't getting any love because they done left the HBCU sphere, HBCU conferences, and now they're treated like they're not an HBCU or they're outside of the HBCU sphere. Maybe you feel like they need to highlight their players and their team a little bit more. Well, tell Hampton to make their own pregame show. Alabama A&M did it. They're doing the right thing. If you want to move into a big deal, start treating yourself like a big deal. That's how I feel about it. All right. Tomorrow's episode, we'll be back with a big deal. We'll be back with North Carolina A&T, and they're moving into the CAA. We'll be back to discuss exactly the biggest challenges and also some of the additional biggest games of the week. We have a stacked episode this Thursday. We're almost to the game week. I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm passionate. Now, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, genuinely and supremely appreciative. Now, in the meantime, in between time, if you're looking for me, you can find me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.